everyone, this is your Krishna Mylvaganam, and today's video tutorial is all about how to come up with an effective research problem, how to add sufficient significance to your research study, and how to come up with the most relevant research topic to your research study. I'm going to explain this in 3 simple steps. However, to start off, first we need to have a research topic. I'm choosing innovation as the research topic for this video per se because it's one of my favorite area of study. Secondly, you need to have a research context. In this case, I'm choosing the Sri Lankan telecommunication industry. In that industry, I'm choosing the Sri Lankan National Telecommunication Service Provider, which is basically the Sri Lanka Telecom Organization, as the research context. Alright, so the research topic would be innovation and the research context would be the Sri Lanka Telecom Organization. Step number 1, you need to gather sufficient practical contextual evidence to prove that innovation is a burning issue at this particular chosen organization. In this case, it is basically the Sri Lanka Telecom Organization. How do you do that? You choose the market leader of this particular industry. If you take the Sri Lankan telecommunication service industry, I would say Dialog Axiata is the market leader. So you choose the market leader and you perform a comparative study between the market leader and the researching organization, and you identify the innovation inadequacies of the researching organization compared to the market leader. Furthermore, in addition, you can also explore the secondary sources. You can conduct pilot interviews, and if possible, if you could prove that the decline of the financial performance of this particular researching organization is a result of poor innovation performance of this organization. Furthermore, you can look at the decline of customer satisfaction, the increase in customer complaints, the failure of new product launch, all these failures. If you could see if there is a connection between the poor innovation performance of this particular organization, then that gives you ample amount of evidence to prove that this is a burning issue that requires attention and that requires research to be conducted. Okay, step number 2. You need to identify sufficient academic research gaps on your chosen area of study. Now, this is especially important when it comes to PhD students because they are generally expected to contribute to the area of study that they have performed for over a 3-year period. Now, research gaps basically means that there is insufficient body of knowledge that is existing on a particular research topic where it limits the ability to draw a conclusion on that particular research topic. So how do we identify these academic research gaps? There are certain tips. I'm going to share 3 tips how you can identify these gaps. The more these gaps that you have in your research study, the more sound your research problem becomes. Alright, tip number 1, to identify research gaps, you need to organize your academic literature. If you take an area of study like innovation, according to past literature, it has existed since the 13th century. However, we don't have to go back that long. We can look at literature probably within the last 100 years because the concept of innovation within an organizational context got popular somewhere in the 1930s after the Industrial Revolution. Then again, since I know this subject very well, the term invention started to be replaced by the term innovation somewhere in the 1950s. So probably we can look at the literature of last 50 to 100 years and we can organize the literature in 2 main ways. One, you can organize it chronologically, which is basically based on the publication date. So what you can do is you can go back to the past 50 years, 100 years and see what are the key research studies that have been performed on the topic of innovation within the last 50, 100 years, and you can organize them in different folders. Second way you can do this is thematically. That is basically based on different themes and different theoretical concepts of innovation. I choose to do it chronologically because I find it very convenient. So once you organize all your literature of innovation in a chronological order, then secondly what you can do, tip number 2, you need to go back to these folders and you identify the most significant research studies that have been performed within the last 5 years, and you locate the sections such as research limitations and the future research directions that are set by these researchers. I'm actually going to show how that is done. So I have 2 journal articles with me as a referral. Now I'm going to refer to the first journal article, which is basically Market Orientation, Innovation and Business Performance, Insight from Women Entrepreneurs in the Fashion Industry in Ghana. So this is from the Journal of Creativity and Business Innovation. If I could go to the final pages of this journal article, I can see that there are sections called limitations and future research, and in those sections I can see some research gaps being stated. For example, if you look at from the middle of the paragraph of limitations and future research, it says that adopting a quantitative methodology and being cross-sectional in nature, the study sampled women entrepreneurs within the Ghanaian fashion industry, irrelevance of time effect. This means this particular research study has performed based on quantitative research methodology and cross-sectional study design. What they mean as quantitative research methodology is that on a research project you can either collect your data, you can either collect quantitative data or qualitative data, but some choose to collect quantitative as well as qualitative, which is known as the mixed method research methodology. So this is an indication that this study has been performed quantitatively, whereas the future researchers may perform the same research study on a mixed research methodology basis. And then cross-sectional study design means for the chosen area of study, you gather data from the respondents just one time over different times. So if you're conducting a longitudinal study design over a cross-sectional study design, that means you are not restricting your data collection to one particular time period, but you are also collecting at different time periods to see whether there are any changes in the responses given by the respondents. So to keep it short, now this is a research study that has been performed based on quantitative methodology and cross-sectional, and I see the limitation of these studies that they could have been this study could have been performed on a mixed methodological basis and also on a longitudinal study design basis to make it more valid and reliable. On top of that, it is also stated here, a relatively large sample of respondents was obtained for this study. It is therefore empirically relevant for further studies to widen the sample size. So here the researcher is also indicating, though this study has been conducted on a larger total population, future studies may increase the size of the population just to enhance the validity and the reliability of the research study. Now let's look at the second research article. This is written by Ronald Jans. The topic of this research article is the determinants of organizational innovation and interpretation and implications for research libraries. Now here as well, if I go to the final pages, there is a section called limitations and there is also a section called future research. Under limitations, here again I see consistency with the previous research article, because in this case as well the researcher is saying, because of the small population of this particular study, the researcher was not able to perform structural equation modeling, SEM. SEM means it's a powerful data analysis technique which is a multivariate data analysis techniques which can offer detailed insight for the researchers to explore the collected data. So the limitation of this study is that they were not able to apply this powerful data analysis technique because of the fact that the population of the study is very small. And then on the last paragraph of the limitations, similar to the previous article that we looked at, in this article also it states that this particular study is conducted based on cross-sectional study and the researcher is recommending a longitudinal study, just like the case that we looked at earlier. So I can see a lot of similarities between the two articles when it comes to the limitations of their study, of their research study, and also when it comes to their future directions that are being proposed by these researchers for the future researchers. One is that most of these studies seems to be performing a quantitative research study under a cross-sectional study design basis, and most of these studies seems to gather data from a limited population, which is restricting the researchers to apply powerful data analysis techniques like SEM. So I have identified two significant research gaps just in these two articles, and I also identified one additional research gap. If I look into the second article, future research, It says on the second paragraph, the predictors of management or administrative innovation can be quite different from those affecting technological innovation. What this means is that, since I know this subject very well, in the past, innovation is always seen as technological innovation, but current research studies, not current, the recent research studies have started to identify innovation does not mean necessarily just technological innovation. It also could mean administrative innovation, marketing innovation. So the researchers have identified different types of innovation. So the decades of studies that have been done on the subject of innovation has been performed seeing innovation as technological innovation. So whatever the research variables that has been identified by the past research study may not necessarily be relevant when it comes to other types of innovation, such as administrative innovation or marketing innovation. So this is another significant research gap which I could see. So the more the research gaps like this, if you could find out, the more your research problem becomes very sound and effective, because these are existing research gaps on the topic of innovation. So in summary, just by referring to these two literature articles, I was able to identify three powerful significant research gaps. One is based on the research methodology. Most of the studies seems to be performing a quantitative research methodology and a cross-sectional study design. Two, I see an enormous research gap when it comes to data analysis, because the researchers seems to be collecting data from a limited respondent group, and they are not able to apply powerful data analysis techniques like structural equation modeling technique, which is very essential to make sure that your research study is valid and reliable. Thirdly, I see that the past research studies that have been performed on the topic of innovation has focused mainly on technological innovation and has left out the other important types of innovation that has been identified by the recent researchers, such as let it be management innovation, marketing innovation, etc. So this is a very clear evidence. See, if you could organize your literature, you can very well easily identify powerful research gaps which will boost your research problem. Now, a lot of students, when they apply for their doctoral degrees at top universities, the reason they get rejected, not getting admission onto their PhD programs, is because their research problem is not very sound, or it's not convincing for the examiner to approve as it a worthwhile study that to be conducted for over a period of 3 years. So please use these tips and enhance your chances of obtaining admission onto the doctoral degrees. This is a very simple process, but I learned it the hard way. But because I learned it the hard way, I'm able to present it in a simpler manner. So please use these tips and enhance your opportunities of getting into these doctoral programs. Okay, tip number 3 to identify significant academic research gaps would be, I'm sure you're not going to like this, extensive reading. What I'm saying is that not always that you will be able to locate powerful significant research gaps just by looking into sections like limitations and future research. Though it is a very helpful, powerful process, you may identify other significant research gaps within the body of these sources. So it is essential that you perform an extensive reading within the area of your study. I know the reason you would have even come into looking into this video, you want something, some tips or some steps where you can perform your research study at a faster pace. However, I want to point out that nothing could be replaced as you extensively read on the area that you have chosen as your research study. And then the last step, the third step, which is the most simplest step, always remember that when you draft your research topic, please make sure that it has a synchronization with your research problem and the research significance that you are trying to bring into this area of study, which will make your research topic very relevant to your chosen area of study. So hope these 3 steps helps you to obtain your chances of obtaining entry to doctoral programs, and also to draft your first at least 50% of your initial chapter, the first chapter, because I see a lot of students struggling, moving around in multiple directions, not knowing how to come up with an effective research problem. Though I have presented this in a simple way, please know that this is a very powerful process. You can apply it and see whether it's working or not, and you can always share your comments with me on knowledge disruption. Thank you very, very much. I had a long day in the office, and I've thought of doing this right after my office hours. Hope these tips and steps are very helpful for you to pursue with your research project. And thank you for watching this video, and as always, let's spread love and intelligence. Thank you very much.